Everything about Christianity is forward-looking. And anything that is not forward-looking in our Christianity is the error of the prosperity gospel in one iteration or another. We're always looking to how can we make everything here and now seem to reflect the values of the Christian life that I want. I want all these things now. We call it in theology an over-realized eschatology, an over-realized eschatology. We want the end things that God promised for the next life, we want them now. Now, is there some transference? Is there some sense in which we can have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness here in the present existence of our Christian life? Well, sure. But all of it is seeing through a glass dimly. All of it is with an aching heart for the coming of Christ. And when Paul says, really, I'm on trial here, because of the hope and the resurrection of the dead. Well, that's true not only historically in the life of Christ, which was just a few years prior, but also in our future. We are all about the hope of eternal life. The only reason I'm sharing the gospel with people is so that they will get ready for the return of Jesus Christ and the coming of the kingdom. That's the whole focus of the Christian life, and it should be our focus, and Paul summarizes it well. Now, all of that is laden here in the context of him, again, wisely trying to say, how can I get out of this jam? How can I live on to live out another day of doing what I'm called to do, and that is to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. And so when he says that, what happened is exactly what I think he anticipated would happen. He aligns himself with the Pharisees and their view of the afterlife. Verse 7, and when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. Now, Luke, the writer of Acts, adds here in verse 8 some understanding for those that may have not have known in the first century. What we have going on in a Jewish context in Jerusalem are two parties, one that's liberal, if you will. They no longer believe in the supernatural. They're religious. They try to hold to a cultural Judaism, but they don't believe that God, the God who created us, is stepping into time and space to do anything in his creation. They're much like the deists of the early founding of this country. That God kind of worked things out, wound it up, and then stepped away and walked away from it all. That's not what the Pharisees believe. And as he says here in verse 8, it's the Sadducees who say there is no resurrection. There's no angel, there's no spirit. There's nothing beyond what you can see. They're materialists. They believe in what's right in front of them. But the Pharisees, they acknowledge them all. We know there's an afterlife. We know there's things beyond what we can see. We know there's spirit within man, and we know that there are even a whole class of individuals called angels and demons, right, that are spirit beings that exist outside of our domain. All of that they affirm. Verse 9, pardon my cough this morning, there was a great clamor that arose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party stood up, and they contended sharply. We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him? You see the genius of this. Right? You got this conservative and you got this liberal group. You have those that believe in the supernatural, those who don't believe in the supernatural. And Paul aligns with the supernatural believers, right? And he says, this is really about my belief in the afterlife and the resurrection. And then they start fighting with each other. And now they're starting to stand up for Paul, even though they wanted to kill him just verses earlier. And so he gets out of this jam. A great clamor arose, verse 9, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party, so they stood up, they contended sharply and said, we find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him? When the dissension became violent, they were fighting now each other. The tribune, who had eyes on the ground, they were going to watch what happened here in this trial of Paul. They were afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, so they commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them by force and bring him into the barracks. So Paul lives on, and Paul continues, and he gets through this very contentious situation and saves his own skin, and that's great, very wise, very smart. But at the core of it is a statement about the afterlife, one that should really have a controlled sway in our own minds and something that should make a difference in our lives. So let's think this through for just a minute this morning and think through what the implications of this might be, and I hope change your perspective so you never become a Sadducee.